Hey, Dr. Reese, this is David Goodman, and here's my persuasive speech. The name of my speech is To Eat or Not to Eat, and the speech is around genetically modified foods. I have some research questions while I was going through my research, looking up things for the speech, and here are some. How are foods genetically modified? And we'll get into that while later on. Um, I have another one. Are genetically modified foods safe to eat? And should modified foods be sold in store? Right, here's the research questions. All right, introduction. Many consumers are very suspicious of what they put in their body and what they consume and stuff. Um, this attitude stems from consumers being concerned about how genetically modified foods affect the human and actually the earth. However, there has not been enough research to conduct and prove a negative impact. Um, so basically, their fears stemmed on nothing. The advantage of genetically modified crops significantly outweigh the health risks, which are theoretic. So these people are very suspicious of genetically modified foods, but the good outweigh the bad. How are foods genetically modified? Um, According to Andrew Cockburn, leading journalist and documentary producer on technology, genetic modification, also known as GM, so if I say that, that's what that's for later on, is a recent development which allows specific genes to be identified, isolated, copied, and inserted into other plants with a high level of specificity. Genetic modifications allow scientists to produce food that contains only the best traits and flavors. So basically, they take the traits from the foods that are already bigger and stuff like that, and they genetically modify them and put them into um, other foods, and it modifies them and makes them like the old plant. Furthermore, the National Library of Medicine has stated that genetically modified foods produce more nutritious food, disease, and drought-resistant plants that require fewer environmental resources. So it doesn't require as much water or fertilizer. Less use of pesticides increased supply of food with reduced costs and longer shelf life, faster growing plants and animals, food with more desirable traits such as um, faster growing plants, um, bigger plants. Here's an example of one. So you have the potato that produce less of a cancer-causing substance when fried, and medicinal foods that could be used as vaccines or other medicines. Right, here's a slide on how they're created and the cons and pros of these. Most of the foods in stores are genetically modified. So basically, all the things that you buy from, like say Walmart or anywhere else, your big like stores are probably genetically modified or they have pesticides on them. All right, are they safe to eat? Uh, 37% of the U.S. consumers believe that GM food is safe to eat. Um, that's still a big percentage of people that think that they're pretty skeptical over it. 88% of scientists members of the American Association of Advancement of Science believe GM food is safe to eat. So scientists are vouching for it. However, there are demanding safety testing procedures in place to test genetically modified food crops. So, according to McFadden, by building a detailed profile on each stem in the transformation process from parent to new crop, and by thoroughly evaluating the significance from a safety perspective of any differences that may be detected, a very comprehensive matrix of information is constructed which enables the conclusion as to whether a GM crop derived food or feed is as safe as its traditional counterpart. So basically, they're just testing to see if it's as safe as the ones that aren't modified. I have another quote. Zahara Sisi, a researcher at the University of Guelph States, Gulf, some criticized the use of antibiotic resistance as markers in the transgenesis procedure, and that this can facilitate antibiotic resistance development in pathogens that are a threat to human health. So basically, it kind of messes up your immune system. She also continues on. Cece goes on to state, gene transfer from GM foods to cell of the body or to bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract would cause concern if the transferred genetic material unfavorably influences human health, but the probability of this occurring is remote. So it's a very low chance of happening, but it's still there. So that's a point that's a con to think about. Are they safe to eat, and should they be in stores? So a lot of people, they demand that more safety procedures be tested on these foods, and they want to make sure that it is most certainly very safe to eat. In other words, the public is not necessarily ready to accept things that they do not know much about. So I think a lot of people are still very skeptical about it. A lot of their beliefs lead to biases, and those beliefs are usually influenced by friends, family, and social media. So a lot of it is just influenced on other people's beliefs coinciding with theirs, I guess you could say. They kind of collide, and people just go off of what other people think instead of actually doing the research on it. But during a recent study by McFadden and Lusk, two scientists found simply asking objective knowledge questions slightly changed beliefs about GM food and safety, and consumers were significantly more likely to believe GM food was safe to eat after a series of questions that tested objective knowledge about genetics and GM food. So basically, these people that have rash beliefs about the modified food were interviewed by McFadden and Lusk, the two scientists, and after they were shown information and the actual statistics of the modified food, they kind of changed their view a little bit on their beliefs about the food. Moreover, genetically modified foods should be sold in stores, and consumers should be better educated about genetically modified foods. So I think if you are like worried about it, worried about your food and what's in it, I think you should do research on it and then base your belief on the research that you have made. Are they really safe to eat? There are two big cons to it. You have antibiotic resistance, which could really mess your immune system up, and you have gene transfer, which would not be very good. Should they be sold in stores? Consumers form their beliefs and they react on their beliefs. A lot of people don't think they should be sold in stores, and they're very skeptical on these things being in the stores near them, and they're not really ready to accept, having that in their store. Again, their beliefs lead to biases, um, but I think, but they should better educate themselves on the food that is being sold. So, in conclusion, although many consumers are skeptical when it comes to GM food, and um, they do not take the time to really research why people think the food is not that good and why they think it's bad for them. They don't really take the time to research the genetically modified foods. So studies have shown that consumers that learn more about genetically modified foods become more accepting of these products after they've done the research. And the possible health risks of genetically modified foods are mainly theoretical, while the advantages of genetically modified crops significantly outweigh the health risk. So there's only a few cons really. The antibiotic resistance and the gene transfer, but the pros far outweigh the cons. Um, so I think people should just research it before they have any rash belief or decision. And here's my works cited.